Morning to you, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Tuesday morning, the 7th of April 2026. It's a pleasure to be back once again. So I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever it is that you join us from. We know that we have comrades that join us from the USA, and we have comrades that join us from the Philippines, Indonesia, name it all around the world. Those from South Africa, we appreciate you a great deal. Those from Uganda, our fellow countrymen and women, we can't say thank you enough for your contribution. Team India, thank you so much. Some few voices from Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, most recently Turkey, among others. We say thank you so much for always choosing to be part of the Football Tribe UG channel. I hope you get to enjoy what we do. Thank you so much for all our new subscribers. We keep growing without looking back. So keep supporting what we do and help us to continue growing. Anyways, this morning, we'll be looking at the preview for the UEFA Champions League that will be getting underway today at the quarterfinals of the competition, with the most successful team in the competition in action tonight against one of the, I think, the joint third most successful team in the history of the competition. And that is the game between AFC Bayern Munich away to Real Madrid. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Arsenal Strip away to Sporting CP or Sporting Lisbon, and then we will also digest into all the other things, because Barcelona will come on Wednesday against Atletico de Madrid, while Liverpool will be away to PSG. So allow me to have our audience tested just to make sure everything does check out before we proceed any further in this broadcast. Otherwise, good morning once again. So I wish to also extend my sincere vote of thanks for those of you that managed to catch last night's conversation. We were on, I think, we came a bit late. I think we started at around 11:40 and we went on for about an hour and 5 minutes. So thank you so much for those of you that gave us your time to be part of that broadcast. Thank you so much, Mariam from Egypt. Mariam has recently become a key contributor to the community. To you, Pedri, wherever it is that you are, I send my special greetings to you in that regard. So today is a bit of a special day for me. It's a big special day, the 7th of April. For those of you that know what it is what it is. So I'm not at liberty to discuss the full details of that, but yeah. That's what's up. So anyways, like I said, without wasting any further ado, we'll get straight into the conversation in regards to the preview for the UEFA Champions League games that will be played tonight, and that's between Arsenal against Sporting Lisbon. But then we also have Real Madrid against Bayern Munich. So we'll start with that game between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. For starters, it's going to be happening at the Santiago Bernabeu. I've not had any rumors whatsoever in regards to whether the Santiago Bernabeu will be covered. You know, every time recently, Real Madrid have hosted whichever club that they see is a very, very difficult opponent, or perhaps that they will need a comeback. They've always chosen to cover. The roof and cook people in there. Unfortunately for them, sometimes they've gotten cooked. Sometimes they've gotten cooked. So it is the road to Budapest, where the final will be played later next month, or very late on next month, in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned. So now Alvaro Arbeloa has something to ponder about. With Eder Militao's return back in the camp, we saw him score against Rayo Mallorca over the weekend as Real Madrid lost by 2-1. Meanwhile, whoever can afford me that Real Madrid away kit, please do the needful, please. So, anyways, the footnote aside, so I think it does complicate the selection process for Alvaro Arbeloa, because you have in Eder Militao, you have an experienced player there. Then you also know that Antonio Rudiger is available to start. I do not think there is a more aggressive defender than Antonio Rudiger that amongst that Real Madrid backline. I do not think I've seen anyone more aggressive than Antonio Rudiger. So he does formulate a very, very crucial part of that backline. Rio Dandy is back with us, says Saka might not play today. It is confirmed that Saka will not be making the matchday squad for today. So it's not a question of whether or if or when. It is a fact that was stated by Mikel Arteta. So we'll get to discuss that. But thank you so much, Rio, for being part of this morning's discussion. So now, if you're Alvaro Arbeloa, you're going up against a team like Bayern Munich. One, I think in terms of game application, I feel like Dean Hasen, young defender, is a bit more athletic or is a bit more fast than Eder Militao and Antonio Rudiger. Nonetheless, their experience versus the youngster is invaluable. And the question is going to be, how does Alvaro Arbeloa look at it? My quick interpretation would be, on any given day, if fully fit, I'd go with Antonio Rudiger and Eder Militao. When those two play, usually or traditionally in the explanation of it, Antonio Rudiger plays as the number 4 and then Eder Militao as the number 5. In other words, Rudiger is the sweeper, Eder Militao collects all the pieces of whatever is left in that sort of action. Then I'd go with Alvaro Carreras at left back, and then right back, I'd go with Alexander Trent-Arnold. And the reason as to why I would go with Alexander Trent-Arnold for the right back role, not because he's defensively better, but I would use him in application similar to how he was used against Manchester City in that 3-0 victory. Because ahead of him, I'd look to deploy Fede Valverde. The beauty about Fede Valverde is that it doesn't matter where you play him on the pitch, he is going to give you his 100%. Okay, besides the goalkeeping position, because I've never seen him play there. But whenever he's called into action, that Uruguayan international, a player that I really, really appreciate for his athleticism. I love his thunderbolt of a shot. When it is on target, rarely does he miss. So I'll play him ahead so that, when they were playing Manchester City, they knew what the risk was against Jeremy Doku. So in the deployment of the act itself, or the action, was that every time you had Madrid on the defensive, what's his name? Fede Valverde or Federico Valverde will be quick to return and provide defensive cover on the far right. That's at the right back position. And then you have Alexander Trent-Arnold tuck inwards a bit next to the center backs, or depending on where the ball was moving. If the ball moved centrally, he would sort of pull out of that defense and then move towards the midfield area, which Fede Valverde continue to provide cover in that sort of sense. So that's how I would look to deploy him, because you didn't want to have him isolated against a Michael Olise, So that would be recipe for disaster. I think 8 out of 10 times, Michael Olise would do a number on him. So that's how I'd sort of maybe look to deploy him. Even if it is not Michael Olise, let's say it's a Serge Gnabry or whichever it is, or a Luis Diaz. Trust me, it can be a long evening for Alexander Trent-Arnold. But in the application of it, that's how I would look to deploy in that backline. That's, rest assured, that means that Fede Valverde has a place to be in that team. You say, how many players of Real Madrid can get a ban at the second leg? Oh, I'm particularly not sure about that in terms of those that are with the booking and could be out. First of all, because largely, majority of those players stayed clean in the 2-leg fixture against Manchester City. Real Madrid was so good that they hardly put themselves at risk. In any case, I don't think there's any actually on card I stand to be corrected on that regard. I stand to be corrected. But I do not remember having many on card in terms of those that could be suspect for suspension. So now, going forward, sort of in that midfield or further forward in midfield, then I'd think because it's going to be a game of a lot of running, and I'm playing Fede Valverde to this side, Chouameni has to come in that midfield, and then I'd look to use, because if you deploy Camavinga and Chouameni at the same time, it makes it difficult for you to deploy Jude Bellingham if you already have Fede Valverde. Nonetheless, it wouldn't be too audacious for the manager to still try and do that. However, I think it could come at the expense of the team's fluidity, especially if you know that Jude Bellingham is going to be playing especially bearing in mind that it could come at the risk of fluidity, because, okay, Jude Bellingham will give you the box-to-box element, as would Fede Valverde. But if you play with the double pivot of Camavinga and Chouameni, that means you're not going to leave room for Adagula or Brahim Diaz in that team. Now, in purposes of seniority, not because one is much better, or I'll go with Jude Bellingham in that team. You say Fabrizio is saying 6 Madrid players are at risk, including Mbappe, Vinicius. If they get a yellow card this match, they will miss the second leg. But be that as of it may, first of all, Kylian Mbappe can easily avoid a yellow card. 2, Vinicius Jr., I'm not so convinced. Why? Because he's a bit of a hothead, or like sort of he's like a loose cannon, for lack of a better word. He can't go off anytime, out of the slightest of situations, or out of nothing really, or thin air. I'm not going to disregard what Fabrizio is saying. If it is as you state it, that may be the case. But like I said, I do not know, I'm not privy to that, so I won't speak to that in terms of objecting or acknowledging that that is the case. So then we all know that Kylian Mbappe has to start. That's a given, alongside Vinicius Jr. So the question for me is, if you're playing Fede Valverde and Chouameni and let's say Jude Bellingham, who is the additional player that you have to play in that role? Are you going for Adagula or Brahim Diaz? If you go for Brahim Diaz, he's going to give you width just as much as Adagula can play there. But then who plays your number 10 role? Traditionally, if you play Chouameni alongside Fede Valverde, it would be, let's say, Chouameni at the pivot, Valverde to the right, and then you have Bellingham to the left, sort of in that midfield trio. Or you have the two at the base in Valverde and Chouameni, with Bellingham at the tip of it. And then up front, you'd have an Adagula, you'd have a Vinicius Jr. and a Kylian Mbappe. That's how you'd go about it, really. So I think, first of all, I think it would be, it would be, does it look to be a balanced team? That looks for me to be a balanced team. Why not Camavinga? Is he injured? He's not injured. Camavinga is available. But when you start Camavinga and Chouameni, it becomes, you then become a little too conservative, because those are both central midfielders in the sense of number 6s. And remember, Real Madrid are playing at home. With Real Madrid playing at home, they would want to get any advantage that they think they deserve or they can't get out of this fixture, because it's a home fixture for them. You're not going to then play a single pivot when you go to the Allianz Arena. That would be the risk thing to do. Even in this particular, it is a risk to take, but it's one that you can afford to take at home. So that's why I wouldn't want to be way too conservative, because what Chouameni gives you as being played an 8, if you play with Camavinga as a 6, Valverde can still give you. So if you play Tchouaméni as a 6, Valverde is still on the pitch. That's how I'm looking at it. How that then it boils down to how you command those players to apply themselves. In other words, if we are defending and we have to push Fede Valverde to the right to help Alexander Trent-Arnold in terms of defending, that means first of all, Jude Bellingham has to come back in central midfield to help Tchouaméni, and then Adagula moves out of the wing and becomes the 10. In other words, you leave yourself a bit exposed on the other side, or then you push Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Junior wide to try and cover those areas. Really, you leave the central zone almost vacant. So those are some of the risks that they're going to have, because rest assured, on the other side, in terms of a predicted lineup, expect to see Harry Kane, Luis Diaz, Leonard Carl, Serge Gnabry, or actually Luis Diaz, Serge Gnabry, and Michael Olise, with Harry Kane leading the lines. So when you expect that, that's a lot of attacking firepower that you'll need that defense to morph into a back five when you're defending. And then these when it moves into a back five, then you have the midfielders convert into a layer of 3. That's, let's say, if it's Tchouaméni, Bellingham, and Adagula. You get the point. With the other 2 trying to help you with whatever the counter press is, depending on the different phases of play. So that's how I would look to sort of interpret it, Now, first of all, in terms of the game, Real Madrid come into this particular fixture with on the back of a deficit. That deficit is in the sense of losing the last game against Real Mallorca by 2 goals to 1. Bayern Munich, on the other side, had to grind it out against Freiburg, winning that fixture by 3 goals to 2. They were down by 2-0 by the 80th minute, and somehow they pulled one back through Tommy Bischoff, who, by the way, managed to score, I think, a brace on the evening, and it was, I think, around the 91st minute, because Bayern Munich left it really, really late. They found the equalizer very late on, and subsequently the winning goal. So you look at it and think to yourself, are they capable of that against Real Madrid? You're as good as your previous fixture in terms of form. That's how we'd qualify it. So we're talking about a Real Madrid team that knows or scores a good chunk of goals. Bayern Munich, on the other side, know a thing or two about scoring goals. In other words, for whatever question Real Madrid may have in the sense of scoring goals, be rest assured Bayern Munich will have a response. They have one of the best front lines, if not the very best, across Europe. Harry Kane, in just the German Bundesliga, he scored 31 goals and provided 5 assists in about 26, is it 26 or 29 appearances? I think they're about. You have a Michael Olise who has 11 goals to his name, and this is just in the German Bundesliga, and 18 assists. That's equally impressive in its own right. Then you have a Luis Diaz, whose numbers are no less convincing, So really, you're going to find it a bit hard to defend against these guys, against these guys. Luis Diaz has 15 goals in the German Bundesliga with 11 assists. That's a 26 goal involvement. Now, you can see Harry Kane has a 36 goal involvement. Michael Olise has a 29 goal involvement. Luis Diaz has a 26 goal involvement. Now, in the UEFA Champions League alone, he scored 4 goals and provided 3 assists. I do not think it does get any better than that for a forward line. Really, Serge Gnabry's numbers have not been as good. His contributions to play, for those of you that watched the fixture against Atlanta, particularly that first leg, you'll know that he's quite you know, as good. So Real Madrid have a lot to worry about, especially in that forward line of Bayern Munich. So if you're Real Madrid and thinking that who do we mark out of this game, I do not think cutting out an individual is enough for you. You have to cut out the entire front four. And once you cut that out, then you will give yourself a fighting chance. But let's not forget, I think as we saw the case, I think it was in Bayern Munich's 3-1 loss against Arsenal. They do have that long ball that they can play in the channel if you do leave yourself exposed and get things going quite quickly, because they can be quite athletic as well. I think at the end of it all, we're going to have a very, very interesting fixture. One for which the historical context is in the favor of of Real Madrid, because they've won this fixture more than Bayern Munich have done it. Then in that Bayern Munich midfield, expect to see Alexander Pavlovich alongside Joshua Kimmich. Joshua Kimmich, I think, is equally aging like fine wine. Then their backline is where I have question marks. On Konrad Lemar, Jonathan Tah, Kim Min-jae. I think if that Upamecano is fully fit to start, he will start ahead of Kim Min-jae, because Jonathan Tah has been quite a mainstay in that team ever since he left Bayer Leverkusen in the summer. Then Josep Stanisic will equally be there or available at it. So that's at right back, you know. Now, you think of it or try to digest through it. The presence of Manuel Neuer cannot be underestimated in goal because of what he gives you. He can easily win you a game of football. And that's where Real Madrid on the other side are slightly lacking. They are without their definite goalkeeper in Thibaut Courtois. With Thibaut Courtois absent, it is going to be Andre Lunin between the sticks. He's not a bad goalkeeper. For those of you that care to remember, I think it was the 2024 or the 2023-2024 season. He was, he was called into action on multiple occasions and he stood tall. So much so that our clubs tried to target him in the subsequent summer, you know. And it ended up with a new contract offer from Real Madrid. So that's how good he is. When you look at head-to-head, in terms of the meetings between the two sides, that's Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. These guys have met as many as 28 times. I think. Oh, is it 28 times? I'm trying to think. No, not 28 times. That's not the thing. So let's look at the most previous meetings. You have a meeting in the 2023-2024 season. That's when Real Madrid went on to win it. Carlo Ancelotti doing it for the third time with Real Madrid, having done it in 2022. Yes. So Real Madrid managed to beat Bayern Munich by 2-1 at home. That was after drawing the first leg by 2-2 at the Allianz Arena. What that means that Real Madrid went through, and this was at the semi-final stage. Then you have to go back to the 2018 period when you had Real Madrid share the spoils with Bayern Munich at the Santiago Bernabeu in a 2-2 draw. Really, Real Madrid had won the earlier fixture at the Allianz Arena by 2-1. Then in 2017, they still met. And this is all about the UEFA Champions League. 4-2, Real Madrid winning at the Santiago Bernabeu and winning earlier than that or prior to it by 2-1. In 2017, Real Madrid won the UEFA Champions League title. They beat Juventus in the final. And in 2018, they did it again. They beat Liverpool in the final. You remember that Liverpool side of, what's the goalkeeper? Loris Karius, the German international, when he fumbled that final, really, because it did expose him. You remember there's that second goal from Gareth Bale that he was trying to showstop and it ricocheted into the back of the net. It left him no praise, and that's why Liverpool quickly ran away to AC Roma to secure the services of Alson Ramsey-Baker. So that's the significance of having a good goalkeeper. And like I've told you, Real Madrid are going to be without Thibaut Courtois. That could easily be the difference between winning and losing a game of football. If you want to remember a game of football where Thibaut Courtois constantly came to the rescue of his side, go and watch that league phase match between Liverpool and Real Madrid. At some point, it was one-way traffic, and it was Thibaut Courtois coming good for Real Madrid in that particular fixture. So that's the importance of having a good goalkeeper. So when you drift back in 2014, we had Real Madrid beat up against Bayern Munich by 4-0 and by 1-0 in an earlier fixture at the Allianz Arena. The 4-0 came out. The 4-0 was at the Allianz Arena in a reverse fixture that preceded a 1-0 victory at the Santiago Bernabeu. Then in 2012, you had Bayern Munich knock out Real Madrid on penalties. Now, in 2013, this is the 2012-2013 season, when Bayern Munich went on to win it. I think they beat Borussia Dortmund by 2-1 in the final. So, but as you can see, pedigree here dictates that oftentimes it is Real Madrid that come out on top in this particular fixture. Nonetheless, I must acknowledge, from where I sit, Bayern Munich feel like they are the stronger side. Bayern Munich feel like they are the team to beat, And that is not to mean any form of disrespect to Real Madrid. In any case, my worry for Bayern Munich is that Real Madrid oftentimes turn into a different beast of a footballing side whenever they put on that white jersey at the Santiago Bernabeu and it's a UEFA Champions League night. It's not to say they've not burnt their fingers before. That pretty much they've done. But they have a knack for crawling themselves through a Champions League season, and before you know it, they are at the finals. They do not always need to be exceptional. They just need to be good enough on a given day to win a game of football in the UEFA Champions League. So yeah, we should expect a very, very entertaining game between these two sides. I do not think in terms of formation, Vincent Kompany is going to be any different from how he's been deploying himself with that 4-2-3-1 kind of system or 4-5-1 kind of system, depending on how you interpret it, But I don't know. How is it called? I failed to find the word. That I was trying to look for in my head. But yeah. So we'll have to wait and see how it does play out for those two sides, you know. Now, there's an interesting fact that Real Madrid have scored at least a brace in every single tie against Bayern Munich. I think this is at the Santiago Bernabeu. In 2011-2012, Cristiano Ronaldo scored a brace. 13-14, Sergio Ramos and Cristiano Ronaldo both scored braces. In 2016-2017, Cristiano Ronaldo scored a brace. 2017-2018, Karim Benzema scored a brace. And then 2023-2024, Joselu and Vinicius Jr. scored a brace in those fixtures. So maybe that is food for thought that you take into the back of your mind as you look to predict that game, you know. Now, as Real Madrid ponder on how to stop that front four of Bayern Munich on the other side must remember that they must be pondering on how to stop Kylian Mbappe. The beauty about stopping Kylian Mbappe is that cut off the supply and you'll have cut him off. So I think that's what it would take. Nonetheless, that in itself sounds easier said than done, you know. But I'll trust that Vincent Company will have analyzed all these scenarios and come to the outright conclusion for a solution in regards to how they apply themselves against Kylian Mbappe. He's not going to be he's never going to be the best of dribblers. The one thing he has to his side is the quality finishing in addition to his pace. So put the ball on outlay, let him run to it. You may not like what you see. In other words, Bayern Munich ought to close down those spaces, especially in and around the 18-yard box, where Kylian Mbappe would sort of receive the ball from. So you need to cut that out. Should there be any noise background whatsoever, please bear in mind that it is drizzling or / raining on the outside. But as far as I'm concerned, it's currently drizzling. So basically, that's how I envision these two sides. To be honest, as a Real Madrid fan, I'd rather Real Madrid win. However, as a football fan, I know that in terms of everything both sides have managed to do thus far this season, the favors or the odds do tilt towards they do tilt towards that Bayern Munich side. So it's going to be great to see how they sort of fare on, you know. That's why I anticipate a very entertaining match. Could be a high-scoring fixture that can end in a 3-2, in a 4-2, a 4-1. The question is, who carries the day? Realists, Bayern Munich do not often beat up against Real Madrid, and that the only time they knock them out, you ought to remember they advanced to the finals, and that was in 2012-2013 season. I'm going to go on a limb of faith. Real Madrid must have watched those clips from Arsenal's 3-1 victory against the same side, and perhaps they lost to Freiburg and then things like that, as well as their victory over the weekend, to get a sort of a sense of how to mitigate the damage, like Arsenal tried to do, at least, or they were quite successful at it, even though they gave away that one chance that Leonard Carl managed to bury. So you have that. Then, in addition to that, you think to yourself, how to cut it off, both ends. If you're to stop Bayern Munich and you're Real Madrid, you need to cut out Michael Olise. You need to find a solution for Luis and keep Sajinabre or Leonard Carl, whoever is played behind the forwards, as the third member for midfield, I think that is where your luck will be. That is where your luck will be in stopping those. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult. The reverse is true for Bayern Munich in stopping Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. Those two are going to be such a big, big threat in that game. It's the kind of game that those Real Madrid players are literally coached to play at the highest level. So do let me know what your thoughts are on that particular fixture. That's the preview for it. My feeling is that I'm still really, really torn. But I think we'll do what? Because on one hand, like I said, I wish for Real Madrid to win. But on the other hand, I feel Bayern Munich are just too good. That Bayern Munich could win it by 2-1. That's my prediction. I hope I'm right. Anyways, moving on. Already Rio was asking about Saka and the likes. Now, it was confirmed by Mikel Arteta that the fixture between Sporting CP or Sporting Lisbon and Arsenal does come a little too early for Arsenal's Bukayo Saka and Jurriën Timber. I do not think I can overstress the importance of that game to Arsenal. Apologies. I said this before, and this was in the aftermath of the international break. Every game that Arsenal play is going to feel like a final. They must treat it like a final because of what is at stake. Whether you have injuries or not, the world will not be sympathetic to you in terms of what the final output will be. So we know for a fact that they missed out on the Carabao Cup, losing to the final or at the final by 2-0 against Manchester City. Then we know for a fact that the FA Cup, they got eliminated at the fifth round or at the quarterfinals at the hands of Southampton. Now, with that said, the question would be, the question would be, how then do you treat the Premier League title race and the UEFA Champions League? On paper, you need a few wins to seal them both. But they come like a hard cone. I don't know if you guys have had the bad experience of eating hard cone. And here's why. Sporting Lisbon knocked out Arsenal of the UEFA Europa League in 2022-2023 campaign. A 2-2 draw away to Sporting and a 1-1 draw at the Emirates, and the game went into penalties. That Sporting CP won. In the Champions League, there's only one meeting between the two sides, and that was last season in the 5-1 victory for the Arsenal. This time round, Sporting Lisbon are yet to, I don't think I've lost a game at home in the Champions League. So that's a huge bonus. Piero Hincapié returns to his former, Victor Gyökeres returns to his former bosses, and we wait to see what he does bring to the table. Of course, they know him so well that I won't be surprised if they cut him out of action. But you see, cutting Victor Gyökeres out of action is simple. Just close those spaces, those lines through which they may try to find him. But also you ought to remember that they don't find him quite very often. And that brings me to the question of, do you start Kai Havertz or do you start Ebeleche Eze? I don't know. When Kai Havertz provided the assist for Victor Gyökeres' goal, for me it was a kind reminder that, look here guys, Kai Havertz seems very comfortable creating chances for Victor Gyökeres, even though they've not played much together. On the other side, you have tons and tons of boxes to tick, of boxes to tick. I don't want to think Arsenal have been complacent. I'd want to think that they still do not know how to sustain pressure. Because there's pressure all over the place. Having been knocked out of the FA Cup, it means their chances at winning silverware are even smaller now. Why? Because now they are left in only 2 competitions. In other words, the task could be simple or easily put as they must win at least one of them. If Arsenal do squander their 9-point lead in the Premier League title race, you're never going to hear enough of it. Quote unquote bottlers. If Arsenal are eliminated in the UEFA Champions League at the hands of Sporting Lisbon, again, it will be another capitulation. We're talking about a team who, until yesterday, had not lost a single game of football. Not in terms of scoring, but in terms of being part of that team. So, both sides will do their homework. It is not a secret that Arsenal overall are stronger than Sporting CP. However, the absence of Jurriën Timber and Bukayo Saka does not do enough to alleviate any fears that Sporting CP could cause an upset. Really, it leaves you with a bit of options in Noni Madueke and Max Doman. We know for a fact that the application, his ways of applicating himself, that is weird air, are quite different from his ways of application of flying of the statement has eluded me. Apologies on that. His application is quite different. That is Bukayo Saka from that of Noni Madueke. I found Noni Madueke to be a very good player, but one very lucky in his own decision making in the final third. Oftentimes, his decision making is poor. It does not yield the desirable result. If you want him to attempt to bring a cross, you bring in a bad one, oftentimes. If you want him to cut back and score for himself, I think about 7 out of 10 times he's going to hit a miss. So he can be very ineffective. However, on a good day, he can be a spark of life. On the other side, and in terms of right back, Jurriën Timber has been the best right back for me in the Premier League this season. And I say that without any fear of contradiction whatsoever. If you have somebody different, do let us know down in the comment section. But even with his absence, I'm thinking Ben White, who has not had a good return from injury, still gets a nod to start. Now, this reminds me of Thomas Partey last season. Had Thomas Partey been available in these same scenarios, I wouldn't be too surprised if he had played him. But we cannot cry over spilled milk, all day long. But that's how you should expect. Gabriel Martinelli could start even against my personal preference. I'd prefer Leandro Trossard, Noni Madueke and Victor Gyökeres, Martin Odegaard. in that sort of 4-3-3 kind of system. Raya is a mainstay in goal. On the side of Sporting CP, the players that you look at and you feel sorry for yourself. Francesco Conceição, very, very good player. Very, very good player. Morita is a very good player. Pedro Goncalves, very good. So usually their team will assemble into a back four, a 4-2-3-1 kind of system. I do not think Sporting CP at home will encourage themselves to be very conservative. It's not in their nature and spirit. Nonetheless, when you measure the size of opponent that they are up against, you'd understand why they could deploy that measure. First of all, if I was Sporting Lisbon, it's been well documented that Arsenal can be beaten. 2, deny them set-piece plays, especially corner kicks, as much as possible. Then, also, make sure when you go into the counter press, do not overly commit. Do not overly commit. Give yourself a chance or your teammates room for recovery, because that's how I would view it. You know? So tactically, that's how teams are going to set up. But in that team of Arsenal, you're trusting Martin Odegaard to pull the strings. My challenge with him has not changed ever since the start of the season and prior to it. Releasing the ball late. Sometimes he's too late. He's too late that he sort of, it's too late in the sense that by the time he thinks of making the pass, the player that had been intended for that pass has either moved on or switched directions. I'll give you a real life example. Just imagine you waiting on a product at a supermarket and they tell you it is out of stock, but it will be in stock the subsequent week. Then you go the subsequent week and then you look at it and they tell you it's finished. Whereas you may lose trust in that business. You know, I do not think these ones will want to lose trust for each other. But for me, I saw Sporting a very, very relentless Sporting CP. Should they choose to open themselves up in the manner in which they did against Bordeaux Glimot, especially in the reverse fixture when they needed to win by 4, the many goals, trust me, the story will be different against this Arsenal side, who can be physically bullish, who know how to run, who know how to score the goals. So, is that to suggest that they do their own bio tank or something? The idea is to avoid any form of suffocation. What I appreciated about Sporting CP was very fast. They moved the ball much quicker. They were relentless in their runs. So first of all, either of the sides would want to limit the damage in terms of conceding early. David Raya's ball distribution has to be spot on. Would I sacrifice Kai Havertz to start off the bench? Difficult question. But yes, I said this, Martin Odegaard, just returning from injury, you're not going to have many expectations in him. But throw in but throw him on for at least the 60 minutes and see what happens. Even if it's the opening 45 and then you take him off and say, it's not working, maybe I need to introduce an Eze, a Kai Havertz. However, I don't think I've enjoyed Kai Havertz's application in midfield. I don't think I've seen good enough of that. You know? You say, hi, after the derby game, lost to Sunderland, Ed Howe sacked from Newcastle, and now Xabi Alonso to be appointed as manager for Newcastle. Hi, Raymond. Raymond Kangumba is a Newcastle fan who is constantly of the view that Ed Howe ought to be sacked and be replaced almost effective immediately by his ever-changing suggestions. Today it is Xabi Alonso, tomorrow it will be Mauricio Pochettino, the other day it will be Enzo Maresca, it will be Tindo, something like that. So that's as good as variations come. So the injuries for the Arsenal, not good. Mikel Merino still out. Pierre Hincapié hadn't been anywhere to be seen. On the side of Sporting Lisbon, you have Piero Magnus. You do have Gyogi Kachorashvili, Nuno Santos, Fotis Lonyedis, and Jovan Quenda. I don't think Jovan Quenda has had the kind of season that he would have loved to see in the final campaign of his career with Sporting CP. It's not to say that they cannot reunite in the future, but when you remember the length of contracts Chelsea people put their players on, it almost becomes impossible to think about that. You'll get them out. Should you feel the need to just do so? The one thing I've never understood with Portuguese clubs is that they buy players. They sell players quite expensively. And when it comes to buying players, they say there's no money. You've seen how FC Porto tried to, I don't know how to even put it. They tried to undercut Arsenal in a deal for a local cow. So that's just about it. It's going to be a tactical masterclass. Should we be able to make it before 10, we'll do the watch along. But like I told you, Tuesday is going to be such a busy day for me. As we speak, I have a client who is just confirmed the meeting. So I need to get out and prepare for that. But also, when it comes to the schedules that come much later on, you know. So yeah, huge miss if Arsenal to get a decent result from Sporting. Now, remember when I mentioned that every game will feel like a final? Because for Arsenal, the implications are dire. Out of the FA Cup, lost the Carabao Cup final, Premier League title race, every game is like a final. They need to win at least 5 of those games or 4 and draw 3 to seal it. Then, on the other side, Sporting Lisbon do not have a very rich history in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned. It's not a very rich history. Not that that of Arsenal is any rich, because they've only played 3 semi-finals. They've played 1 final. A final in 2006, semi-finals in 2006 against Villarreal. That Villarreal that had players like Riquelme. Then in 2008, two, 2-7, sorry, 2-8-9. No, 2-7-8 when the Man United went on to the final at Moscow. Then recently, 2024, 2025. Those are the semi-finals that Arsenal played. So they too have not had great history to their side. Given the kind of squad that Arsenal have, there should be no excuse whatsoever as to why they end this season trophyless. The drum rolls have started to, to start being sounded. A lot of people, okay, not a lot of people. There are some Arsenal fans that have been really, really taken back by those two consecutive defeats, which came for the first time this season, losing to Manchester City in the Carabao Cup final and losing to Southampton in the FA Cup to be knocked out. So some fans think Arsenal are going to bottle the Premier League title. And we'll talk about the difficulty of an early kickoff post a Champions League away trip prior to Saturday. We'll talk about that at the right time. But I will keep saying this without tiring until Mikel Arteta helps Arsenal cross the line and delivers a title, whether it's the Premier League title or the Champions League title. Yeah, questions are going to continuously be on his name. Then when you look at the Premier League title, out of the two trophies that they are still in, the Premier League title, I think, is one that majority of Arsenal fans would want the most. Not out of preference, but out of circumstance, I would want to believe. Why? When you're leading the Premier League table with 7 games left to play and you are 9 points clear, really your opponent has a game in hand, trust me, bottling doesn't look any different than it would come if you were to lose that Premier League title to Manchester City. Whereas for the UEFA Champions League, people will constantly give you a benefit of the doubt. You're up against some of the biggest teams. The competition has, if let's say you go through Sporting CP, you'll have a semi-final of either versus Atletico de Madrid against, you'd have a semi-final of either Atletico de Madrid or Barcelona. So in other words, if it is, I don't think out of the two sides, out of Barcelona and Atletico de Madrid, I think Arsenal would prefer to play Atletico de Madrid as opposed to playing Barcelona. We'll have to wait and see. Those two sides face each other tomorrow. We'll get the preview for that. Then that will be the ideal world. And then see what happens. But still, if you get knocked out at the semifinals, they look at it a certain way. You'll get the criticism, but losing to Barcelona, or even if it is Atletico de Madrid, wouldn't be the worst of both worlds, even though you'd still be expected to go past them because you look better than them. But for the Premier League title race, there's absolutely no excuse. And today's game is a must-win for Arsenal. If they win that game, they go into the weekend with a sense of belief that we are back to winning ways. If they lose that game or draw that game, trust me, that confidence further dips because it is already done. They are low on confidence following those 2 consecutive losses. So that's to their detriment. So they wouldn't want to lose that fixture at whatsoever cost. Bournemouth are going to present quite a huge challenge. And we know that last season, Bournemouth managed to beat up against Arsenal by 2-1 at the Emirates Stadium. So let's wait and see. But my prediction is going to be I'm trying to formulate it. Who wins it? I've not been very encouraged by Arsenal recently. So I'll go for a 2-2 draw. I'll go for a 2-2 draw between the two sides. I see a vulnerability of Arsenal losing. I see a vulnerability of Arsenal losing. Sorry, conceding. I see that vulnerability in them. So, for the game between Barcelona against Atletico de Madrid, we'll preview that tomorrow morning, as well as the game between PSG versus Liverpool. We'll do the previews tomorrow morning. But do let me know what your predictions are down in the comment section as you enjoy this broadcast. Keep watching, keep enjoying whatever it is that you enjoy the most. And yeah, keep supporting the Football Tribe UG channel. So, those are my views on those two games. Enjoy your rest of the day, and let's meet at night. Chances are, if we can make it on time, we'll do the watch along starting at 10 p.m. If we cannot, we'll just do our 11 p.m. or look to do the broadcast after the game. So keep that in mind, or bear that in mind. So have a wonderful rest of the day. Stay blessed, and bye-bye for now.